Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin of Collecting Japanese Prints. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where on Wednesdays we speak about Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. Thanks for joining me. I've been absent from Woodblock Wednesday for the last couple of weeks. My apologies, I missed speaking to all of you. I've been really busy with a lot of things, year-end inventory, taxes, and also working on my latest exhibition. I'm going to go live on Friday with a really nice group of prints. I would say there's about 25, 30 prints in the group. It's a smaller exhibition for me. It's a late winter editions. They're mostly from one consignor, which is always an interesting thing because you get to see prints that are fresh to market. They haven't been shopped around, and they're all from a very serious, astute collector who kept them in our archival materials, and they weren't framed or displayed, so the prints are of the best quality. So that's something to look forward to. It's going to go up again on Friday. So if you want to learn about the exhibition that is online for all those prints available for sale, join my website email list. So go to collectingjapaneseprints.com and add your name and email to the email list, and you'll hear when our exhibitions go live. So for today, I thought it would be interesting to discuss the topic of snow scenes. Most of the United States is under snow cover right now. I'm talking to you from Chicago, and so I am very much dealing with the snow. Though today and yesterday it was kind of warm for us, and so there is a snow melt right now. And about a week or two ago, we were dealing with almost 32 to 35 inches of snow. We got snow over the course of 2 weeks, and we were really buried underneath the snow. So much so I couldn't really get out of my garage for 3 or 4 days. It was interesting, but it's what happens when you live in the Midwest. But it inspired me to discuss that sort of theme in Japanese prints. Snow scenes are really popular. They're probably the most popular motif in prints, particularly 20th century prints. And rightly so. These artists working in woodblock print, in the woodblock print medium, really exploited the process to bring out really wonderful atmospheric effects that woodblock prints produce to create wonderful snow scenes. So I pulled out 4, and they're by different artists working in different genres, and we could explore how the artists used the theme to achieve the effects they wanted. So without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look. So you know what? It's a little dark today, and let me back up, and I'm going to turn on the light. All right. Hopefully that's not too bright. There was light earlier today, but then all of a sudden it's gotten cloudy. So I'm going to pan in on this print. It is by Hasui, Kawase Hasui, who's arguably the most prolific and important 20th century print artist in the Shinhanga tradition, who focused on snow scenes. So that's a very long qualifying sentence or statement. But basically, Hasui was known for snow scenes. Yoshida was known, the other major giant of 20th century printmaking, Hiroshi Yoshida, he was known for his travels and his prints depicting North America and Southeast Asia, and of course Japan. And his prints didn't necessarily focus too much on the snow, but Hasui was very much an artist that focused on the atmospheric qualities produced in woodblock printmaking and made some amazing snow scenes. And this is one of them. It's a very early woodblock print. It is titled Miyazu in Tango District and the print is dated 1921, so it is indeed a rare pre-earthquake design. This is a print that I have actually never seen before in person. It is illustrated in the catalog raisonné that Hote Publishing produced, I want to say, over 10 years ago. And so I've only seen it in the catalogs, but this particular example made its way to me a few weeks ago, and it will be available for sale on my website in the coming weeks. I'm sort of enjoying it and studying it, and so this particular design showcases a snow scene, but what's kind of interesting, if we want to look at this, is that the print shows Japan as it's being more oriented towards modernization. And so in the design, we see, I believe those are telephone poles or electrical lines. I think they're telephone poles. And so the point is, we have this idyllic snow scene. It could be anywhere in Japan, maybe even sort of, just outside of a major city. And you see all these houses. It almost has like a suburban feel. But these electrical lines really showcase the age that this print was produced. And this is kind of an interesting subject for Hasui because from what we know, Watanabe, the publisher, was quite controlling of his artists, particularly the subject matter. And Hasui was working for Watanabe for a short period of time when this print was produced. And when you look at Hasui's body of work, it's actually his pre-earthquake designs that are a bit more Western looking. Or when I say that, I also want to say that they're a bit more truthful in how they depict Japan. And so the perspective in his pre-earthquake designs are a bit more Western, less Japanese in perspective. This perspective here is more Japanese, though. It's a sort of aerial view from it doesn't actually really make sense logically. We're kind of in the air looking kind of down, but then above. But the subject really shows Japan, Tokyo, as it looked in the 20s with these electrical or telephone poles being erected all around town. And we're not getting that idyllic sort of temple scene in the snow. We do see that we have a sort of a complex here where this is a torii gate. So it is a shrine. And so there is this tradition within Hasui's work where he shows shrines and temples. And the difference between a shrine and a temple, a shrine is a Shinto place of worship or, reverence, and a Buddhist temple obviously refers to a temple is a Buddhist building where Buddhas are enshrined and where one can go and worship and meditate and do the things that one does at Buddhist temples. So they're a little bit different. Shinto, the Shinto religion or the Shinto belief system is indigenous to Japan, whereas Buddhism actually was imported to Japan. Buddhism originated in India and then traveled to China and made its way to Japan through China. So that's the difference. And so we do get a little bit of that, in the design. But by and large, this is sort of a faithful rendition of what a street in Tokyo, a suburban street, not in the middle of Tokyo, certainly not Ginza, but in Tokyo would look like. And, I want to zoom in so you could see the wonderful atmospheric quality in the printing. You can see this gray on the top. It's like this shading of bokashi, or gradation of color from light to dark. We have the lighter area, and then it goes into this darker area, which highlights these snowflakes falling. It's a wonderful technique. And then you have this the kind of the wood grain of that is also present in the background that creates a very strong atmospheric quality again. And this is sort of the magic of wood blocks, how they're able to be sort of carved and printed in such a way that create this sort of hazy, atmospheric, snowy atmosphere. It's fantastic. I don't know if you could see on my camera here in the video, but there is a nice wood grain in the sky, and there's also these lines that were created using the Baron or the printing instruments, a circular printing instrument made out of bamboo, to to impart the pigment onto the paper. And so one rubs the print on the back against the block, and you get these kind of squiggly lines. And Watanabe's publishers really brought those lines out and kind of showcasing how prints were made, but it also creates kind of a really cool, it reinforces that atmospheric quality that I'm sort of mentioning about these wood blocks. So yeah, this print really celebrates the medium of woodblock printmaking. So I'm going to zoom in again so you can kind of see the landscape. You see this pilgrim. He's dressed in a traveler's or pilgrim's sort of outfit. And obviously, he's been walking this way. He's probably approaching the shrine there. And here you have the Watanabe seal used in pre-earthquake period. He later started using that after the war, but in this case, it's a pre-earthquake stamp. Here's an early signature for Hasui, and there's the title cartouche. So for these early period prints, you would also get this title cartouche. So I just wanted to point out some highlights. And so when we're thinking about Hasui prints, later after the earthquake, Watanabe had a bit more control over his artists, particularly Hasui, and encouraged him to continue doing woodblock prints with designs of snow. But he discouraged him, as far as one can see through his body of work, from creating things that were too realistic. And so I've seen paintings of post-war designs where Hasui put telephone poles and put cars and men dressed in Western clothing, and Watanabe removed those elements and added a woman in a kimono and removed the telephone poles. Some of the designs were actually rain scenes, and Watanabe changed them to snow scenes. And he was doing that because he knew that the print collectors or the people interested in woodblock prints were interested in Japan as it once was. Not necessarily as Japan as it was transforming itself into sort of a urban metropolis, especially Tokyo. We don't see many Hasui prints that depict Ginza in the 20s when people were drinking out of martini glasses and dancing in nightclubs. He doesn't show that. He shows the more idyllic countryside. But because this is a pre-earthquake design, he is showing you modernism as it's sort of slowly making its progress throughout Japan and its landscape. But that changes later, and so I encourage all of you to sort of look at Hasui's body of work and see the difference between his earlier pre-earthquake designs and then his later designs done, after the earthquake. Watanabe certainly knew what would sell and encouraged his artists to sort of go down that line. So moving along, I wanted to show another work. All of the prints I'm discussing today relate to snow scenes. And so this design is by Tomo Inagaki. He's a Sosaku Hanga artist. And this print depicts Tokyo Station. So for those of you who've traveled to Japan and gone to Tokyo and you're familiar with this building, it was done during the Meiji period in a very distinctive architectural style. And we see it in the snow. And this print was done in 1929, so it's after this print. I put these in order by when they were made. This is from 1921, this is from 1929, and this print is done entirely in black and white. So it's just the black and gray of the ink mixed with the actual color of the paper. So it's a really interesting technique, and so Inagaki really creates an effective snow scene just with tonalities of gray. And here you could see there is a light, so a pole there with light. So we are certainly showing a modern scene of Tokyo, particularly with this Western style Meiji period building. And you have people crossing the street with their umbrellas. And Inagaki makes them, he renders these people in really quick sort of silhouettes that accentuate the sense of movement across the visual plane. It's a really cool print, particularly because one considers the tonalities of just gray and white in this print, and how that is so effective. So moving along to the next work, this is a rare print by Yoshio Fujimaki. And Fujimaki was also a Sosaku Hanga print artist. And he did this print in 1935. So it's a bit later. Fujimaki's story is kind of tragic. He died in 1935. So this is one of his last prints. And he was born in 1911, so he was quite young when he died. And there's a lot of information out there. I'm not so certain that it's true or not, but a scholar wrote a book about how he believes, and he had some evidence that Ono Tadashige, Ono, the Sosaku Hanga artist who was Fujimaki's very good friend, actually killed him. And, and his body was found in the Sumida River, or right near it there. And Ono was the last person to see Fujimaki. And so I won't go into all of that because it never was proven. But it's a fascinating sort of subtext to Fujimaki's life. But Fujimaki was a really interesting Sosaku Hanga artist. He participated in a lot of Sosaku Hanga magazines and produced small work like this. He does have some larger scale prints, but this is a lot of his body of work. And he wasn't that prolific because he only worked for about 5 years making prints. So there aren't that many of them. But this print, as you could see, is quite small when we're comparing it. This is an Oban size print. This is kind of like a postcard size print. And what we have here is a very similar scene to, here, I'm going to see if I can move this. Bear with me, I'm trying to do this with one hand. Okay. So what we have here is a very similar scene to Hasui's work. We have, I'm not saying this is a temple complex or anything like that. It might be. But what we have is a telephone pole and a street with more houses on the left. There's more structures. And so there's like some mountains in the background here. And there's also, this looks like maybe Mount Fuji in the background. But the point is, it's a very similar subject. And like Tomo Inagaki, he produced this print in black and white. Most of the print is black. And the areas that are white are the areas that the artist carved out. And so that's different from Hasui's print, where all of the lines that you see were left on the block and everything else was carved out. So this process in making this design was the inverse than this process. So he carved out the lines and left the black. That's the block. The black is the block. So it's an interesting effect. Inagaki did the same technique as Hasui. And so you'll see this print and this print is the same technique, but Fujimaki did it the other way. And a lot of Sosaku Hanga artists produced artwork in this manner. It's a faster way of working, which comes off much more expressive. And so it seems as if these artists were, when they were carving the block, they were directly working on the block almost as if they were painting. As opposed to this print where Inagaki carefully carved out each line. This was thought out and planned in advance. Fujimaki didn't always work that way. And this, you could see him carving the block in the moment and creating the design as he carved the block. I don't think he had anything planned out ahead of time, and this is what happened through the process of carving a block as if he was painting. It's really interesting. And the last work is the largest and probably the most impressive. Dare I even say that when we're talking about pre-earthquake Hasuis. But this print is by a Sosaku Hanga artist as well, Yoshihei Takeda. And so Takeda was an artist who participated in several art magazines by Sosaku Hanga proponents. He participated and contributed designs to the 100 Views of Tokyo. And so this is a larger scale work for him. This print was done in, 1936. And here, let me get closer, you could see. And this particular design depicts one of his hometown and after a snowfall. And you could just see how wonderful the colors are as they sort of been applied in a really loose sort of way. And if I zoom out, you could also see this interplay between the white of the snow, the grayish blue of the sky, and how these colors were added. They were added by this layering and printing color upon color. And so this print does not have a key block. This is a very typical Sosaku Hanga design where elements of color are printed on top of each other. This design is different in the sense that the key block was the outline of the design, but and several blocks were used to print the gray over the white, much like Hasui's print. This is a print done in one go. This print is similar to Fujimaki's in a sense that there is elements of this design that was produced by Takeda in the same way as Fujimaki, and they were printed over and over, so you get this layering effect of the building here. So it's pretty cool. And this design is considered one of Takeda's most celebrated works. He didn't produce that many prints. I've only seen this print in person twice. In my life, I've been collecting and dealing for over 22 years. And this is only the second time I've seen this design. And the first time it was in a museum. So, that tells you it's quite rare. And this impression, a lot of these Sosaku Hanga prints, because they're so rare, have had a really interesting life. And the back of the print here, there's an inscription that gives the title, the date, but there's an inscription that discusses the exhibition that this print was in. And so Takeda participated in several Sosaku Hanga exhibitions, particularly in the 30s and 40s. So I'm going to zoom in so you can enjoy the print. Now, for those of you who've noticed this little notch, this notch is not damage, but it's actually the kento or the registration notch that the artist used to keep the print in the block so it wouldn't slip. So that's kind of an interesting sort of thing. You sometimes see it. On Jacqueline prints, you see that notch. And other Sosaku Hanga prints. You never see it on Shinhanga prints, and that's because the woodblock printers and carvers would always remove the notch because they would print the print on a larger sheet of paper and then just cut out the notch so you wouldn't see it. But technically speaking, all prints produced with woodblock prints had some element of a registration notch in order to keep the prints from moving. You know, it's interesting. We here. This is the latest or the youngest of the designs, and we see here the same telephone poles that we see in the other two designs, and so even a smaller rural sort of town has these elements now. And it's also kind of interesting. Takeda's story is interesting. I should point this out. He got involved with printmaking by Yamamoto Kanai. Actually, Yamamoto Kanai was the founder of the Sosaku Hanga movement. But in the late 20s, early 30s, he moved out into the countryside and started teaching farmers how to make paintings and prints. And that's what he did. He basically sort of dropped off the map of artists working in Tokyo. He didn't show any more work, really. I mean, he did some paintings and they were shown, but not necessarily to the scale that he was working in when he was in Tokyo. And so he started the movement, but kind of passed the baton along to Onchi. But in the countryside, Takeda met Yamamoto. And so he learned about art, painting, and woodblock printmaking. And so it's this direct lineage from the founder of the movement to someone that was really enthusiastic, who then went on to produce really compelling prints. His designs, as I said, Takeda's designs are kind of rare. You do see his 100 views of Tokyo prints because they were produced in larger amounts. But his smaller work or his larger scale work outside of those Oban size prints are hardly seen in the marketplace. And I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe because he didn't produce as much, but also maybe people don't know what they have. And so, I just encourage people to sort of think about what artists might be in your collection. Maybe you have a Takeda among a group of other prints that you weren't sure about. And so the way that you would tell, this is Takeda's very distinctive sort of signature in Japanese, and this is a kind of in kanji format. And so if you have a print that has that symbol, it is most likely done by Takeda. So now I'm going to kind of zoom out, and you could see all of these works again. Each of these artists treating the subject of snowfall quite differently, and I think that's really what makes print collecting fun, because we could see here. Let me see if I can move this over. Excuse the extreme close-up of my hand and the print. So we see different treatment on the subject by a variety of 20th century print artists. Of course, we have Hasui, a master, and this print is such a stunning Shinhanga design. But when we and it's unfair in some ways to pin this against the other prints because it's a different format, a different way of working, a different way of looking at printmaking. This is Shinhanga was a collaborative process. So Hasui was working with Watanabe, the publisher who hired the woodblock carvers, the woodblock printmakers, or the printers. And so, it was a collaborative process. And they knew what they were doing and produced amazing designs. And then these three prints here represent the Sosaku Hanga movement of artists that were in many cases self-taught And their MO was really self-expression. So Fujimaki was really about expressing his feelings at the moment of carving this block. And so the print reflects this immediacy of his expression within the sort of the working of the artist with the block itself. So that's kind of neat, as well as the printing, of course. And then Inagaki here is interested in showing a more sort of modern way of illustrating Tokyo, and so it's a quite striking design. And of course, Takeda's print is very expressive. It's open. You really get a sense of walking into this village scene, and it's very charming. And it's charming because, I mean, the composition is quite welcoming, but also the way that it's printed. It's printed with a sense of warmth and enthusiasm for the medium that, just really conveys those feelings throughout the design. And you see that typically in Sosaku Hanga prints. You see the artists working and their enthusiasm for the design and for the carving and for the printing and doing everything themselves. So yeah, that all really comes through. I'm going to back up so you can kind of see the prints on the table here. So one last time. I think this is a really interesting group. Very different. All working with the same idea, same subject, and then these elements of modernism sort of pop up in each of these designs. Well, there you have it. I think that's a really cool kind of connection between artists. I think the Sosaku Hanga artists knew each other. I don't know how well Hasui was versed in Sosaku Hanga and in those artists, but it's kind of a cool place for all of them to meet, to show 4 separate works by very different artists, sort of working with the same idea. I think that's cool, and I think that's what makes print collecting interesting. I know collectors that are interested in collecting just snow scenes. I know collectors that are interested in collecting prints that show Japan's modernism and elements of modernism. I know collectors that collect the opposite. They don't want to see an element of modernism. They don't want to see anything that reveals the time when the print design was made. They want to see sort of a timeless scene of old Japan. You could collect all kinds of designs for all kinds of reasons, and I think that's what makes collecting a creative endeavor, and that's what makes collecting fun. And so it was a joy to be able to share these prints with you. And so, if you like the video, feel free to join my mailing list or like us on Facebook or follow us on Facebook. And of course, if you want to see other things or have any comments, feel free to leave them below. That would be great. I'm happy to field any questions you might have or hear about some ideas you might like to see play out on Woodblock Wednesday. So I want to thank all of you for joining me. If you haven't had a chance, check out my website, collectingjapaneseprints.com. Sign up for the email list because my website update will be up on Friday. And so if you want to hear about it first, sign up. Look forward to seeing you all next week on the next installment of Woodblock Wednesday. Thank you.